PHP quietly runs a massive share of the web WordPress, Laravel, and countless APIs you've used without ever seeing the code. In this video we're walking through 6 modules from PHP Level 1, Setup, Variables and Types, Control Flow, Strings, Classes and Objects, and handling errors properly. By the end you'll have the real working vocabulary of the language, not just syntax you've memorized. Every PHP file starts life the same way: installed locally, run from the command line, and eventually served over HTTP. Let's get PHP running and write the first script. Install PHP 8.1 or newer using Homebrew, apt, or a Windows bundle like Laragon. Running PHP with the version flag confirms you're on a modern release, and PHP also ships an interactive shell you can drop into for quick experiments. Every PHP file opens with the PHP tag. That's the switch from plain text into executable code. The echo construct prints one or more strings, and inside double quotes, \n is a real new line, not just 2 characters. Real apps run inside a web server, and PHP ships a lightweight one built-in run PHP-s with a host and port, pointed at a folder with an index file, and every request reruns that script fresh, no Apache or Nginx needed while you're learning. That's the whole loop: install, write, run, and eventually serve. Next, let's look at how PHP stores data once your script actually starts doing something. PHP variables carry no type keyword, and no type is locked in. The same variable can hold a string, then a number, then a boolean, one after another. Every variable starts with a $sign, and there's no type keyword before it. PHP figures out string, integer, float, or boolean from the value you assign. Names are case-sensitive, so $name and $name are 2 completely different variables. _dump is the tool you'll reach for constantly. It prints both the type and the value, so you can watch the very same variable go from an integer to a string the moment you reassign it. PHP automatically converts types when an operation expects something else. That's type juggling. Add a numeric string to an integer and you get an integer back. Concatenate with the dot operator and you get a string instead. PHP 8 tightened these rules a lot, which is exactly why the strict equality operator is almost always the safer choice. Accessing a missing array key doesn't crash your script, it just gives you null with a warning, which is where the null coalescing operator comes in. Double question marks fall back to a default only when the left side is null or unset, and the assignment version only sets a value if it isn't already there. So PHP is dynamically typed but not sloppy about it. Juggling has rules, and the null coalescing operator gives you a clean way to handle missing data. Next, we'll put that data to work with control flow. Control flow is where a script stops running top to bottom and starts making decisions, branching, looping, and skipping based on conditions. Conditions run top to bottom, and the first truthy branch wins everything after it gets skipped. Worth memorizing: PHP's falsy values, false, 0, an empty string, an empty array, and null are all falsy, everything else counts as true. Switch compares loosely, and if you forget a break, execution just falls through into the next case, a classic source of bugs that's bitten nearly every PHP developer at least once. Match, added in PHP 8, fixes exactly that problem. It compares strictly, never falls through, and it's an expression, so it returns a value you can assign directly. A neat trick is matching on true itself, which turns match into a clean set of range checks. While checks its condition before every pass, so it might not run at all. Do while flips that it runs the body once first and only then checks, guaranteeing at least one iteration. PHP's classic for loop covers the same ground when you know exactly how many times to repeat. For each is the loop you'll actually reach for with arrays: no index variable to manage, just a value, or a key and value together. Looping by reference with an ampersand lets you modify the array in place, though it's good practice to unset that reference right after the loop. Between if, match, and for each, you now have the core decision-making toolkit PHP code leans on constantly. Time to look at the data type you'll manipulate more than any other: strings. Strings are where PHP's quoting rules actually matter. Single quotes and double quotes behave differently, and a handful of built-in functions handle almost everything you'll ever need to do to text. Single quotes give you literal text, no interpolation, minimal escaping. Double quotes interpolate variables directly and support escape sequences like a real new line. Default to single quotes for plain text, and reach for double quotes only when you actually need that interpolation. Simple variables interpolate directly inside double quotes, but array keys, object properties, and method calls need curly braces around the expression to stay unambiguous. That curly brace form is the safe default whenever plain interpolation looks confusing. Here doc behaves like a double-quoted string that can span multiple lines without a wall of escaped quotes, perfect for building SQL or HTML fragments. Now doc is its literal cousin, behaving like single quotes but across multiple lines. Suppose returns false, not -1, when it finds nothing, which trips people up because index 0 is a valid match but is itself falsy. PHP 8 added str_contains, str_starts_with, and str_ends_with specifically to sidestep that trap, and they read more clearly besides. With strings under control, you've got the tools to format and validate real user input. Now let's move from single values to something that bundles data and behavior together: objects. PHP is fully object-oriented once you need it to be. Classes bundle properties and behavior together, and this module builds that up from a plain constructor to real encapsulation. A class is a blueprint. This refers to the specific instance a method is running on, which is how the constructor tells the property apart from the parameter that shares its name. Each object you create with new keeps its own separate copy of that state. Constructor promotion, added in PHP 8, collapses that boilerplate. Declaring a property and assigning it from a constructor argument becomes one line per property. Square then extends rectangle and calls the parent constructor directly, reusing the exact same area logic. Marking a property private means only that exact class can touch it directly. Outside code has to go through methods like deposit and withdraw, which is what lets those methods validate every change and keep the balance from ever going invalid. Static properties and methods belong to the class itself, not to any one object. Self: refers to the class from inside it, so a shared counter can climb every time a new instance gets created, without any single object owning that count. Properties, constructors, visibility, and statics, that's the object-oriented core you'll build everything else on top of. Last stop: what happens when something in your object graph actually goes wrong? Things fail: division by 0, bad input, missing files. This module is about handling that failure deliberately instead of letting your script die with no explanation. Try wraps code that might fail, catch runs only if a matching exception type gets thrown, and finally always runs regardless error or not, which makes it the right place for cleanup like closing a file or a connection. Order matters when you catch multiple types. PHP matches the first catch block whose type fits, so put the more specific exceptions first. Here, an unparsable string and an out-of-range number get handled completely differently, even though both started as bad input. When two exception types deserve identical handling, you don't need two catch blocks. Separate them with a pipe inside one catch, and PHP treats either type as a match for that single handler. For domain-specific failures, extend an existing exception class and carry extra structured data along with it. Here the custom exception stores both the requested and available amounts, so a caller gets a readable message and a getShortfall method to act on. That's try, catch, finally, targeted exception types, and custom exceptions of your own. Everything you need to fail loudly and specifically instead of silently and vaguely. That's PHP Level 1 end-to-end, from installing the interpreter to throwing your own exception classes. Every code sample here came straight from the Mastery Path lessons, linked below in order, so open them up, run the exercises yourself, and keep building from there.